in a wilderness. But the chorus of the old songs had another use besides this obvious one of asserting the popular element in the arts. The chorus of a song, even of a comic song, has the same purpose as the chorus of a Greek tragedy. It reconciles men to the gods. It connects this one particular tale with the cosmos and the philosophy of common things. Thus we constantly find in the old ballads, especially the pathetic ballads, some refrain about the grass growing green, or the birds singing, or the woods being merry in spring. These are windows opened in the house of tragedy, momentary glimpses of larger and quieter scenes, of more ancient and enduring landscapes. Many of the country songs describing crime and death have refrains of a startling joviality like cockcrow, just as if the whole company were coming in with a shout of protest against so sombre a view of existence. There is a long and gruesome ballad called "The Berkshire Tragedy," about a murder committed by a jealous sister, for the consummation of which a wicked miller is hanged, and the chorus, which should come in a kind of burst, runs, "And I'll be true to my love, if my love will be true to me." The very reasonable arrangement here suggested is introduced, I think, as a kind of throw back to the normal, a reminder that even the Berkshire tragedy does not fill the whole of Berkshire. The poor young lady is drowned, and the wicked miller, to whom we may have been affectionately attached, is hanged. But still a ruby kindles in the vine, and many a garden by the water blows. Not that Omar's type of hedonistic resignation is at all the same as the breezy impatience of the Berkshire refrain, but they are alike in so far as they gaze out beyond the particular complication to more open plains of peace. The chorus of the ballad looks past the drowning maiden and the miller's gibbet, and sees the lanes full of lovers. This use of the chorus to humanize and dilute a dark story is strongly opposed to the modern view of art. Modern art has to be what is called intense. It is not easy to define being intense, but roughly speaking it means saying only one thing at a time and saying it wrong. Modern tragic writers have to write short stories. If they wrote long stories, as the man said of philosophy, cheerfulness would creep in. Such stories are like stings, brief but purely painful, and doubtless they bore some resemblance to some lives lived under our successful scientific civilization, lives which tend in any case to be painful and in many cases to be brief. But when the artistic people passed beyond the poignant anecdote and began to write long books full of poignancy, then the reading public began to rebel and to demand the recall of romance. The long books about the black poverty of cities became quite insupportable. The Berkshire tragedy had a chorus, but the London tragedy had no chorus. Therefore people welcomed the return of adventurous novels about alien places and times, the trenchant and sword-like stories of Stevenson. But I am not narrowly on the side of the romantics. I think that glimpses of the gloom of our civilization ought to be recorded. I think that the bewilderments of the solitary and sceptical soul ought to be preserved, if it be only for the pity, yes, and the admiration, of the happier time. But I wish that there were some way in which the chorus could enter. I wish that at the end of each chapter of stiff agony or insane terror, the choir of humanity could come in with a crash of music and tell both reader and author that this is not the whole of human experience. Let them go on recording hard scenes or hideous questions, but let there be a jolly refrain. Thus we might read, as Honoria laid down the volume of Ibsen and went wearily to her window, she realized that life must be to her not only harsher but colder than it was to the comfortable and weak. With her Turrell, Orel, etc., or again, the young curate smiled grimly as he listened to his great-grandmother's last words. He knew only too well that since Fogg's discovery of the hereditary hairiness of goats religion stood on a very different basis from that which it had occupied in his childhood, with his rump-biddy, and so on. Or we might read, Uriel Maybloom stared gloomily down at his sandals as he realized for the first time how senseless and antisocial are all ties between man and woman, how each must go his way or her way without any attempt to arrest the headlong separation of their souls. And then would come in one deafening chorus of everlasting humanity, "But I'll be true to my love, if my love will be true to me." In the records of the first majestic and yet fantastic developments of the foundations of St. Francis of Assisi is an account of a certain blessed brother Giles. I have forgotten most of it, but I remember one fact, that certain students of theology came to ask him whether he believed in free will, and if so, how could he reconcile it with necessity. On hearing the question, St. Francis's follower reflected a little while, and then seized a fiddle and began capering and dancing about the garden, playing a wild tune and generally expressing a violent and invigorating indifference. The tune is not recorded, but it is the eternal chorus of mankind, that modifies all the arts and mocks all the individualism, like the laughter and thunder of some distant sea. A romance of the marshes. In books, as a whole, marshes are described as desolate and colourless, great fields of clay or sedge, vast horizons of drab or grey. But this, like many other literary associations, is a piece of poetical injustice. Monotony has nothing to do with a place. Monotony, either in its sensation or its infliction, is simply the quality of a person. There are no dreary sights; there are only dreary sightseers. It is a matter of taste, that of personality, whether marshes are monotonous; but it is a matter of fact and science that they are not monochrome. The tops of high mountains, I am told, are all white. The depths of primeval caverns, I am also told, are all dark. The sea will be grey or blue for weeks together, and the desert, I have been led to believe, is the colour of sand. The North Pole, if we found it, would be white with cracks of blue, and endless space, if we went there, would, I suppose, be black with white spots. If any of these were counted of a monotonous colour, I could well understand it; but on the contrary, they are always spoken of as if they had the gorgeous and chaotic colours of a cosmic kaleidoscope. Now exactly where you can find colours like those of a tulip garden or a stained glass window is in those sunken and sodden lands which are always called dreary. Of course, the great tulip gardens did arise in Holland, which is simply one immense marsh. There is nothing in Europe so truly tropical as marshes. Also, now I come to think of it, there are few places so agreeably marshy as tropics. At any rate, swamp and fenlands in England are always especially rich in gay grasses or gorgeous fungoids, and seem sometimes as glorious as a transformation scene, but also as unsubstantial. In these splendid scenes it is always very easy to put your foot through the scenery. You may sink up to your armpits, but you will sink up to your armpits in flowers. I do not deny that I myself am of a sort that sinks. Except in the matter of spirits, I saw in the West Counties recently a swampy field of great richness and promise. If I had stepped on it, I have no doubt at all that I should have vanished, that aeons hence the complete fossil of a fat Fleet Street journalist would be found in that compressed clay. I only claim that it would be found in some attitude of energy, or even of joy. But the last point is the most important of all, for as I imagined myself sinking up to the neck in what looked like solid green field, I suddenly remembered that this very thing must have happened to certain interesting pirates quite 1,000 years ago. For as it happened, the flat fenland in which I nearly sunk was the fenland round the island of Athelney, which is now an island in the fields and no longer in the waters. But on the abrupt hillock a stone still stands to say that this was that embattled islet in the Parrett where King Alfred held his last fort against the foreign invaders in that war that nearly washed us as far from civilization as the Solomon Islands. Here he defended the island called Athelney, as he afterwards did his best to defend the island called England. For the hero always defends an island, a thing beleaguered and surrounded, like the Troy of Hector; and the highest and largest humanitarian can only rise to defending the tiny island called the earth. One approaches the island of Athelney along a long low road like an interminable